I will talk about the inequality of opportunities in food security in Egypt. It's other topic other than the education. So I will talk about the food security. I will talk about the objectives, why of this paper, data and methodology used, which is also different from the other one, the first data. Poverty and adequacy of food consumption, coping strategies for insufficient food consumption in Egypt. I will talk about CARI, what this CARI of food security, and then I will talk about the main topic, which is inequality of opportunities in food security. For the objective, this paper attempts to provide a brief about the poverty and food security status in Egypt. Of course, we'll talk about 2018. I want also to examine the inequality of opportunities in food security. I will talk also about the CARI. What is CARI? It is the WFP, this is a WFP approach, which is a consolidated approach for reporting indicators. The CARI it's like a composite indicator for food security, or examine the food security by this CARI. CARI includes 3 indicators, very important indicators. It is a poverty status, it is livelihood coping strategies for insufficient food security, and the last one, which is a caloric deficiency. So we'll talk about the 3 indicators first, and then I will talk how this CARI it will be done, and then how this CARI measure the food insecurity in Egypt. Accordingly, this is the steps of this paper. I will talk about the adequacy of household food consumption, main coping strategies, caloric deficiency, and CARI and inequality of opportunities. The data used in this paper, I used data from HICS, which is a national representative household income, expenditure, and consumption survey. It is carried out by the CAPMAS. I use the latest HICS, which is end by September 2018. Why this HICS used in this paper? Because it includes all data about poverty status, because this is the only survey in Egypt which measured the poverty state. The national poverty rate from Egypt, here in Egypt, is carried out by this HICS. So I used this HICS because the poverty status included in this HICS, and also there's a module for food security in HICS. Also, I will use an HICS 2015 in order to make some comparisons with 2015. And this HICS, as I mentioned, it includes module for food security. For the methodology, for the income poverty, what I use here in this data, the official poverty lines adopted by CAPMAS. I will not calculate it. This is not wealth index. It is an income poverty. Income poverty depends upon the cost of basic needs, which is calculated by the CAPMAS. And when we say poor, it means those people cannot afford to consume minimum acceptable basic needs. And when we talk about the extreme poor household, extreme poor, it means those people cannot satisfy their basic needs of food, so they are food insecure. For the Human Opportunity Index, which is the main topic in this paper, Human Opportunity Index, what this Human Opportunity Index very clearly, or in summary, it is equality of opportunity based upon the idea of giving people of equal opportunity, equal service. I give all household the same service by equally, whatever the socioeconomic background. This is what we mean by equality of opportunity. But in reality, this has not happened, because the Human Opportunity Index, it means I'm talking about a coverage rate, a global coverage rate, but this coverage rate is subtracted from it the inequality among households. So it gives how much those people have equal opportunity of getting or access to this service. And since I'm talking about food security, so when we talk about Human Opportunity Index about food security, it means it gives how much people they are equal in accessibility to this service or to this food security. Without going on statistics, yes.
No, you can.
It's, the Human Opportunity Index is the global coverage minus the penalty, or penalization. Penalization, it gives 0 if all the rate of coverage across all the groups of circumstances here, it's the characteristics of beneficiaries. If it will be 0, and it means all the groups have the same coverage. All groups have the same accessibility. So there is equality between them. And طبعا penalization will grow positive when the coverage between the groups of circumstances also there is an inequality increase. Accordingly, the Human Opportunity Index would always improve when the inequality decrease or the total coverage increase. This is by not by going on details, يعني. Finally, if I'm talking about the Human Opportunity Index, which gives how much the accessibility to the service are equal, if I'm comparing between urban and rural, there is a difference between urban. For example, there is a difference between urban and rural. So when we say the Human Opportunity Index, there is a difference between urban and rural. How we can decompose this difference between the urban and rural. The decomposition of the Human Opportunity Index, we can decompose it into 2 points. What we call it coverage or scale effect and what we call it distribution effect. Maybe the difference between urban and rural is returned back that due to the changes in the average rate of coverage. Or the other one, which is a distribution effect, maybe return back to the change only to the reduction of inequality of opportunities. So we can decompose the change in the Human Opportunity Index according to the coverage or according to the inequality. The first topic, which is the first component of CARI, and I'm talking here about CARI, which is decomposed into or consists of 3 indicators. The first component of CARI is the income poverty. This is a trend of income poverty from 1999 to 2018. We found that there is a steady increase in income poverty rates in Egypt from 1999 to 2018. 2018, the poverty rate is 32.5%. This means we have almost 1/3 of the population are under the poverty line. They cannot satisfy their basic needs. Over the past 8 years, from 2010 to 2018, poverty increased by 7.3 percentage points, from 25.2% to 32.5%, affecting 32 million of the population. If I'm talking about extreme poverty, it means people cannot afford to consume the basic food needs. So also we found that we have a steady increase in extreme poverty or in this poverty from 2012 to 2018. Today, or 2018, we have 6.2% in Egypt. They suffer from food insecurity. They cannot satisfy their basic food needs, 6.2. If I'm comparing by urban-rural, of course, as you look at the graph, of course, we found that the poverty rates are generally higher in Egypt in rural areas if compared by the urban areas. But between 2015 and 2018, if you look at the urban areas, we found we have a jump in the poverty rate in the urban areas between 2015 and 2018, increased significantly from 16.9 to 24.6. While small increase of poverty experienced by the rural areas, but already all rural areas in all years is higher than the urban. Poverty by regions, also poverty is most profound, of course, in rural Upper Egypt. In 2018, we found that 52%, almost more than half of the population in rural Upper Egypt are poor. They cannot satisfy their basic needs. While their population size is only 1/4 of the total population, but they represent 52% of the whole poverty. For governorate, we found that, of course, which is expected also, governorate of Asyut, Suhag, Al-Qusr, and Minya in Upper Egypt are the poorest across the country. We found that in Asyut in 2018, we have 67% of the population in Asyut are poor. Also in Cairo, there is much, almost 1/3 of population of Cairo, 31% are poor. Poverty rate of all Upper Egypt governorates are higher than the national rate, except for Fayoum. If we look at the change between 2015 and 2018, we found that some governorates, their poverty rate increased, and some other, they decrease. We found that, for example, ENA witnessed the largest decline in the percentage of poor people between 2015 and 2018, a decline by 14.5 percentage points. while the highest increase in the percentage of poor people is found in Bahira, increased by 24% point, followed by Cairo, 14% point between 2015-2018. If we look at the second topic, which is adequacy of household food consumption. In Hayek's questionnaire for 2018, we found that there is a question which is household were asked about the adequacy of food consumption during the last 30 days. We found that we have 24.6% of household reported they could barely meet their basic food needs. And we have, above this, we have almost 5% reported insufficient access to food. Accordingly, we have almost 30% does not consume adequate food in the last 30 days. Among the poor population, this percent increased to 41%. 41% among the poor reporting they cannot consume adequate food, while this percentage decreased to 25.6% among the non-poor. By region, we found that percentage of households on the borderline or having insufficient access to food increased between 2015-2018 in Lower Egypt and Frontier Governorate. Of course, as expected, always in rural Upper Egypt is the worst, even in the poverty and in food security also, or in food consumption. We found that in the worst region is adequate food consumption is in rural Upper Egypt, where 43.4% of the population in rural Upper Egypt suffer from inadequate consumption of food. Coping strategies, which is very important, which is the second component of CARI after the poverty line. Household who reported that they have insufficient access to food or at the borderline, we asked them in Hayek's 2018 how to cope with this, what you do in order to cope with this insufficient food. The coping strategies, because we have many coping strategies, WFP, it's not our, classify the coping strategies into 4 categories. We have what we call it consumption strategies, which is the first one, consumption strategies, such as eating cheaper food or reducing number of portion of meals. We have what we call it stress strategies, borrowing food or borrowing money to buy food. Crisis, which is very crisis really, because such as reducing expenditure on health and education and sending children to work and sell income generating land. And the last one, emergency, it's begging, such as rely on assistance or seek for donation. If we look at the coping strategies for poor access, this is a distribution. Those who are on the borderline or consuming insufficient amount of food. This is a distribution. We found that 40% of households relied on the consumption strategies, eating cheaper food, which is more reliable. That way I'm using cheaper food. 31 adopt emergency begging or seek for donation. 13 depend on crisis, reducing expenditure on health and education. If we look at the coping strategies by regions, this is very important that we have always poor household in general, because this will be on general, poor household, or in the rural Upper Egypt or in rural areas, we always depend on the emergency and crisis strategies. Emergency, it means I'm begging or seek for donation. Crisis strategies, it means I'm decrease the consumption on education and health. Overall, urban areas rely always on consumption strategies. Metropolitan, if I'm talking about governorate or region, metropolitan depend largely on consumption strategies, cheaper food 55%. Upper Egypt depends on stress, borrowing more than other regions. If I compare between 2015-2018, here it's not a coping strategy, sorry, this is for caloric intake. Caloric intake, it means, this is the third component of CARI. Caloric intake, it means how much calories I take it from our food, which it's an indicator for diversity of this food or by other word, quality of the food I'm consuming. This is the average per capita daily energy intake. On average, we found that the caloric intake increased from 2015 to 2018. This is for per capita caloric intake. The calorie consumption amounts increased in most Upper and Lower Egypt, while decreased in all metropolitan governorates. We have what we call it caloric deficiency. Caloric deficiency, it means if I consume calories less than the caloric requirement, this means I have a deficiency in caloric, which is food insecure. Of course, it's food insecure. So, which I will not talk about. This is the caloric, yes, caloric, this is not caloric intake. This is caloric deficiency, sorry. This is the percentage of population suffer caloric deficiency. We found that nationally, we have 17% of the population suffer caloric deficiency, compared to 16.3 in 2015. So we have a somewhat increase in the caloric deficiency between 2015 and 2018. In 2018, the majority among poor people, 33% compared to 99% among non-poor, they have caloric deficiency. So we have 1/3 of poor people suffer from caloric deficiency. The caloric deficiency is highest among the rural Upper Egypt and frontier governorate, and followed by urban governorate. So we have caloric deficiency. If I'm talking about the distribution of population suffering caloric deficiency around regions, we found that 53% of the population suffer caloric deficiency are from rural Upper Egypt. Yani more than half who have or suffer from caloric deficiency, they are in the rural Upper Egypt. And about 20% in urban governorate, followed by rural Lower Egypt. If I'm talking about governorates, we found that 63% of the population in Ena and Aswan suffer from caloric deficiency, and 60% in Suhag and 40% in Fayoum. So we have here, there is a problem of food insecurity in those governorates. This is also by household size. I will not talk about this because I know the time. لا لسه شويتين. Okay.
Yes, 4 minutes.
4 minutes? لا 1 minute.
3 minutes and a half.
Okay. Finally, I will not talk about this because it depends upon the household size. Of course, when the household size increase, the caloric deficiency also increase. When I'm talking about the education of head, when we talk about the education of head, of course, the education of head affect the caloric deficiency. When I'm talking about illiterate heads, the caloric deficiency will increase. Carry of food security. Which is, as I mentioned, this is a consolidated approach or composite indicator for food security approach by WFP. CARI, it consists of, as I mentioned, by 3 indicators: poverty status, coping strategies, and caloric intake or caloric deficiency. After we calculate the CARI, which is a composite indicator, we can classify the population according to this composite indicator, which measure the food insecurity. We decompose the population into 4 categories: totally food secure, they are food secure; marginally food secure; moderately food insecure; and severely food insecure. We found that overall, we have 11.2% of households are food insecure in 2018, with slight difference between 2015 and 2018. Since I'm talking about 11.2 they are food insecure, this means they need permanent strategies to cope with this insufficient food insecurity. If I'm talking about CARI by regions, it is the same. I'm talking by the same trend also. We found that households in Upper Egypt are more likely to suffer food insecurity than in any other regions, particularly rural Upper Egypt. We have 23% of households in rural Upper Egypt are food insecure by this CARI. CARI, it means I'm combining the 3, food poverty and coping strategies and the caloric deficiency. So if we have 1/4 of people in rural Upper Egypt, they are totally food insecure. By governorate, we found the same. We have Aswan, Suhag, and Ena. They have the most food insecure in Egypt. We have 40% and above. We have, like Aswan, we have 45 or 46% in population Aswan. They are food insecure by the CARI definition. 18 in Cairo, and we have the minimal طبعا among in Lower Egypt. Characteristics, why I say this characteristic, because it affects the inequality. طبعا I'm talking about large household size, they are food insecure, household in rural areas, household whose heads with temporary work or outside establishment, or illiterate or having basic education, they are mostly insecure. The last part, which I will go with very quickly, inequality of opportunities in food security. Inequality of opportunities or equality of opportunity. When we talk about equality of opportunity, means that the person's chances in access to adequate food consumption, in order to say equality, the accessibility to food consumption should be unrelated to any circumstances or characteristics. This is what we call it equality. But in reality, this has not happened. Accordingly, the Human Opportunity Index is an instrument that allows us to detect situations of inequality between households. And I can use it to evaluate the progress of any public policy programs at the national or regional levels. We have 4 or 3 opportunities I'm talking about. Poverty status, which household is non-poor. Poverty status, it is an opportunity. Why it's an opportunity? Because it gives accessibility to food based on the quantity. Because if I'm not non-poor, I have more access to food. So it gives accessibility to food based on the quantity. Sufficiency of energy, or energy sufficient to be sufficient, it gives accessibility to food based on the quality or diversity. Coping strategies, it means I do not adopt any coping strategies for food insecurity. Aggregate for those 3, which is a carry, this is a lost opportunity, it is aggregate opportunity. And those are the circumstances, characteristics of the household, which is used to measure the inequality of opportunities. We have the regions, of course, and the residents, and all characteristics of the head, and some number of children, and number of elderly, and so on, some characteristics in the household to measure how much these characteristics affect the inequality of opportunities or the accessibility to food security. This is a Human Opportunity Index by residents. We found that better opportunities in urban areas, in all food security opportunities. On average, accessibility to food based on quantity basis, which is poverty, is a sector with the largest urban-rural gap. We have 15 points gap between urban and rural in the non-poor or in the poverty opportunity. For all opportunities, rural areas offer more restricted access with more inequality of opportunity. Aggregate opportunity, which is the last one in the upper, aggregate opportunity for total Egypt reached 52 points. What do we mean by this? And here we have 52 points, the blue color, 52 points. 52 points, it means we have only 52% of all opportunities to food accessibility are available and allocated equitably. This is only. If we decompose between urban and rural, there's a difference between urban and rural. So we can decompose the difference between urban and rural according to the accessibility, it is the coverage, or equality of opportunities, or according to the circumstances or the characteristics of household. We found that urban areas availed more services than rural areas because the urban-rural gap, we have always, in all opportunities, the Human Opportunity Index for the urban is more than the rural. Urban-rural difference is mainly due to the scale effect, which is very important. It means the change in the average rate in urban and rural areas. Change in food accessibility in urban and rural areas, not in the same rate, while the inequality, if I leave the inequality maintaining the same. We have always the coverage between urban and rural is different. This is also by regions. Here the difference between lower and upper Egypt, we found that there is a difference between lower and upper Egypt, always lower. The Human Opportunity Index in the lower Egypt is always greater than the upper Egypt, and it is the highest على فكرة. Always lower Egypt is the highest in food accessibility than the metropolitan, than the rural areas. And this is the other between metropolitan and upper Egypt. We found that overall we have 73% of the regional gap is explained always by the coverage. The coverage of the food accessibility is always higher in the metropolitan, in the lower Egypt than the urban. Policy recommendation, this is the last slide. Policy recommendation from the findings, we found that the composition of the difference between Human Opportunity Index showed the scale effect due to the overall coverage of opportunities is the dominant effect. Always the scale effect is the dominant. Accordingly, public authorities are indeed expected to play more vital role in the process of increasing the overall coverage. So I need to increase the coverage of opportunities of food accessibility. The second, household in urban areas are always higher ability to access food based on equal opportunity principle than those in rural areas. Therefore, balanced public programs are called in order to decrease the gap between urban and rural. We have to revise targeting. This is very important. We have to revise targeting designs within each sector in order to remove the barriers and to improve equality of opportunities, because we always have inequality of opportunities due to some circumstances. So I have to revise the targeting process. An agenda for reforming expensive and inequitable subsidies for food clearly are justified in order to promote also equality of opportunities. And finally, more equitable policies for human development is needed. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.